Thank you very much. And let's start over here. Good afternoon. I loved the presentations. I'm a biologist, and the philosopher was talking about the controversy between biology and philosophy. I think there's no controversy between a biologist and philosopher, because we are seeking knowledge, and we as biologists, and I think philosophers make philosophy out of science. So I think there are ties, there are links between a biologist and a philosopher, and we can try to find a link, as the other lady who also asked a question stated. We could find common points regarding how life is like, where it is starting from, in an interdisciplinary framework. Biologists, philosophers, physicists, and chemists. I don't know why you're talking about this dichotomy between biologists and philosophers. Well, perhaps I didn't make myself clear, because exactly what you're saying is what I was talking about. Anton Falubahu, he was not a biologist, because the concept of biology was not made until the 19th century. He wanted to be listened by the philosophers. He was a biologist. So the idea of grasping or seizing the totality of what is real is a philosophy that's inviting everybody to listen to each other's ideas, because we have a lot to share. This idea of complexity, finality, structure. That's such a concept, by the way. Yes, that's exactly what I was saying, what you've just said. So we both agree on that specific point. I wasn't really trying to talk about a dichotomy. What I was saying is that in the past, there used to be this desire, or at least this desire was more evident, was more noticeable, and that amongst the biologists, philosophers, theologians, and physicists, everybody wanted to be listened to. Leeuwenhoek wanted to be listened by Robert Hooke, for example. So this desire was seen more clearly in the past. Regarding the question by Dr. Pomposo, for example, he would love for scientists to open up, and they do so, but I'm not the person to tell them they should. I'm somebody who lives in the philosophical world, and it's those philosophers to whom I'm asking to be open to listen to biologists, theologians, etc., everybody, right? So we agree with this, but perhaps I wasn't being clear enough. There is a dialogue, just because the object of a study, it's actually calls for a totality in the view, and we're all part of a complex structure, which is the whole. We would like to try to ask. We would like to.
Carlos.
It's a question to Professor Carlos. Two objective questions. Being a finite man, how can they have access to totality? Number two, what is your concept of reality? Thank you. Again, the first question, if men are finite, how can they have access to totality? Well, precisely by admitting they're finite. For example, approaching the truth in order to have this mathematical truth, it's asymptotic knowledge, right? We are really close to it, but we actually don't deplete it. And when we know that we're not depleting, that's when we have critical thinking, and that's where we admit ourselves as being finite. If we really believe that we can attain totality, as it happened with all of the deterministic physics and classical physics with Laplace, Hamilton, Lagrange, etc., we wouldn't be accepting ourselves as finite. Exactly that. And this is evident in the idea there's about time. In classical physics, this is reversible time. This is just a standard time. There's actually not finitude regarding that. We need to know that we are relative, as Hegel would claim, in order to reach the absolute. That is to say, we admit we are finite as long as we know that we are unfinished, and it is to that extent that we have to collaborate with everyone in order to approach reality in an asymptotic way. We approached it, but we do not deplete it, right? We always need to be open to more options, as somebody was saying. My concept of reality, okay, that's the second one. I agree with Professor here. If I hold my own concept of reality, very well defined one, I wouldn't know. I would. It'll be as if I was wearing some glasses. So I need to assume that there is a reality in the epistemological process. I need to assume that there is a reality in order to be able to know. The criticism by Jacques Maritain to Descartes is exactly in that sense. Jacques Maritain is also subject to criticism, but the criticism he makes is suspending judge and doubt itself. How can I learn from that? That when in order to learn we have to doubt something, that indefinite something, it's what we would know then as reality. Was reality? Well, for that purpose there are philosophers, theologians, physicists, ethologists, etc. So there's a bunch of different professions. We have to listen to each other, and it is only to that extent that we'll have clear in mind what is reality, what reality is like. This will always be partial knowledge. Science actually doesn't speak about natural reality only, but what it talks about is the relation between natural reality and men. So theology doesn't speak about God, but about the relation between God and men. That's the way in which we admit we are finite, knowing that in our discourses we are involved one way or another. Galileo's assumption saying that the world is mathematical, it's his own assumption. But numbers, creation of numbers, is a subjective idea that we attribute to reality in order to describe it. It's not that everything we say about reality is objective. Of course, no. Of course, there are ontological elements described by them in such a way that these things could work. Lighting, for example, but we do not deplete it. Of course, every atom of helium within the sun, it's always new.
Mi pregunta va para Carlos Sierra.
My question is for Carlos Sierra.
Bueno, mi pregunta sobre la importancia de la metafísica.
My question is regarding the importance of metaphysics.
Por ejemplo, para hacer la conciliación entre ciencia y religión.
In order to reconcile science and religion, from science, we oftentimes forget about the fact that there is a metaphysical background, which goes from accepting that nature is subject to being known. And also we scientists, for example, base their theories from assumptions such as Newton's laws, which are just accepted as they are. And there are a lot of people who claim to be scientists, but they totally forget about that. So my question is, in order to attain the reconciliation between science and religion, I don't know much about religion. Do you think that the philosophy should actually pay more attention to metaphysics, or how should it be approached? How this matter should be approached? Well, we would have to do a lot of reading. From philosophy, yes, I think metaphysics is something paramount, because even the most basic assumptions of the most positivist science from the 19th century has some metaphysical assumptions. Knowing that there's something as opposed to nothing, something that's not scientifically proved, everybody would say, well, that's obvious from practice, right? But theoretically speaking, that is not obvious. And as you were saying, the intelligibility of the universe, right? As you were saying, they have to assume that there's an intelligence, that there's an intelligible, that is an object and subject. An intelligence and an intelligible, and there might be correspondence between the two of them, and to that extent knowledge can exist. The Galileo's assumption that everything is mathematical, well, it's an assumption that is not mathematical, it's philosophical, it's ontological type of assumption. In that sense, even the most refined of abstractions, as I was saying here, it's incomplete, it's biased. And the Ptolemaic model, as somebody was saying, Ptolemy's model is not false, it's just partial. Galilei, Copernicus, Newton explain more, but not all of it. Newton is partial, that's what Einstein said. So metaphysics is crucial, not just for philosophy, but for the other sciences as well. Not for them to work on metaphysics, but just to know that they're working from assumptions that cannot be proof from their own disciplines. But we have to be a little bit more humble.
Bueno, pues el tiempo de preguntas creo que tenemos que subirlo ya para
So I think we'll have to close the session. But during the conference, people may approach the professors here. If you have more questions, let's give them a big round of applause.